Okay, so we're going to move on now to the final speaker. I would say Marion last, but never ever least. Marion's the director of the CLD Standards Council, which, as you know, is our professional body for people who work and volunteer in CLD. Marion's going to discuss the role of the Standards Council in terms of workforce development, looking at what the upskilling opportunities are for us, because we are in a bit of a different way of working. For me, today's definitely been one, a new challenge, and to look at the pathways available for people coming into CLD going forward. So I'll just hand over to Marion for her input.
First of all, I would like to say good morning to everybody. We're heading towards lunchtime, so hopefully you'll be able to get out into the sunshine soon. So thank you very much for inviting me along today. I'm absolutely delighted. And when I was thinking about working with this area with Tayside and Dundee and Angus and Fife and Perth and Kinross and this whole area, you were all one of the first group of people to invite me when I first started in the Standards Council to come along and get involved, and that relationship has been there for the last 5-6 years, and I am eternally grateful to you all for your feedback and involvement and promotion of the Standards Council, and actually really taking it seriously, what we do and what we're trying to do across the country. So thank you for that. And I actually really love the title of this seminar that we've been having for the last 2 days. So what kind of world do we want to live in? And actually for me, it's quite a simple response, a CLD world. It's not just about community, but it is about culture. It is not just about learning. It is about education, and it's not just about developing in terms of people. It's about the social, the economic, the culture, the physical development of the world that we live in. And every one of those concepts that I've just explained there, CLD has a part, because at the heart of all of these concepts are people, and people matter. And that's who we are, and that's who we work with. So what I'm going to think about in the next 20 minutes or so, and what I'm going to put on the table is some of the CLD workforce features that we know that were in place kind of before COVID, and what's happened since, our response to COVID, what that looks like, and what some of the professional learning pathways are, and what we need to kind of build upon going forward. We also need to think about what our community demands are, but also what our demands are. And the last group that I was in there, I was really delighted to hear some people saying it's about us feeling invested in, but what does that investment look like? What do we need as a profession? What do you need to do your job better? What do you need to be feeling nurtured? What do you need to be feeling supported? How do we grow that learning culture? So as we've talked about, we really do have a changing world. And when we think about politics, Alan mentioned Brexit, the impact of the opportunity to travel abroad, work with young people, the impact of independence. We don't know how the election is going to go next week, but there's also that bit in practice about community development, the political aspects of community empowerment, of working with TSIs, with community asset transfers, the kind of politics that happen at a local level that every day that you need to engage with in terms of local councillors, local community councils, the needs and wants of different groups. Where's that disrupting and shaping practice, and what it is that you're having to respond to or indeed help to create. It is about the economy, the issue of employment. People have talked about furlough, where we've seen a rise in volunteers, people getting involved in CLD type activities purely because employment has changed shape. What's that going to look like when furlough ends? Are we going to look at mass unemployment? Or are people going to be deployed and employed in different ways? Will we still be able to retain the number of volunteers that have got engaged and helped to build that community spirit? Changing work patterns is going to be something that every single one of us are looking at, as some people have worked from home, some people have been working out, still delivering services, outreach and detached work for young people has still managed to happen. What does that look like for us as a group of practitioners? Are we going to still be working in a blended level? Do you know, are we going to be back in the office, everybody in, everybody out? It's going to be a bit like the hokey pokey. How are we going to manage that? Welfare reform is not going to go away in terms of how much money people are able to get, and we see that right across the system there's been millions and billions of pounds put in to try to support the economy and welfare of people right across the country. Is that going to change? How does that look? Will it make life better for people, or indeed will it continue to make it more challenging? The social impact of what's been going on in terms of COVID, don't need to tell you about the health, but what has been really interesting is that Public Health Scotland, etc., have really, in articles in the Lancet, really looking at that community development to help get some of the messages out there. And you'll have seen, particularly with communities where perhaps the uptake of the vaccine might not have been as well received in others, but it was a community development approach, community work approach that really helped to shift some of those challenges and ideas. We've got major demographic changes that we're going to have to think of in terms of an ageing population, but we've also got a group of young people, the whole developing the young workforce, because we know that the data is telling us that young people have economically suffered more through this pandemic. We're still living in a technical revolution, digital industry 4.0, and for again, every one of us in this room, how we've had to practice in our digital skills and our digital agility, and how confident we are or not in those particular spaces, what's that going to look like for us? And the environmental changes in terms of climate change, but also what does that mean for migration? What does that mean for the communities that we live in? Are we going to see more new Scots? How are we going to support them? The impact in practice. And I suppose for me, one of the things about us when we're thinking about the world that we live in is about, is this all going to be about collective action? What does everybody need together? Or is it going to be just about individual needs multiplied? And there is a key difference there. And we need to think about what that looks like for us as practitioners. So some of you will recall that this world that we live in has changed. And in 2018, we worked with Education Scotland to try to do a kind of full labour market survey in terms of what CLD looked like. And what we found was that we were likely to experience a skills gap due to an ageing workforce. Sadly, COVID has not changed that fact. We are still experiencing an ageing workforce. The CLD sector is not ethnically diverse. We've got a lot to do in terms of trying to make it a more attractive, diverse, inclusive profession for people to work in. There is still a gender pay gap that exists where male workers are actually underrepresented in the sector, but where you're getting to more positions of leadership, it tends to be men that are in higher paid jobs still. CLD qualifications across the local authority sector are really required. You'll find that across local authorities, employers are looking for members of the Standards Council and for people to be professionally qualified, but that's not always the case right across the third sector. We've got a wide variety of training, we've got a wide variety of knowledge, and we're highly stressed. Very, very committed, very, very passionate. We've heard stories, not just stories, but we know that people have gone above and beyond not just in the last 18 months, we've always gone above and beyond, but that we're a bit stressed out. And our skills gap are round about leadership and digital. And that's a pressure on employers in terms of time for people to get training, and what does that look like and who provides it. So lots of kind of features that were there in 2018 that seem to still be there in 2021. And over the last year, Alan referred to the CLD Standards Council. We were conscious that there was a lot of questionnaires out there. How's it affecting young people? How's it affecting older adults? How's it affecting various sections of society? But nobody was asking, how does this look for CLD practitioners? So we put out 4 waves, just asking people, what does it look like in terms of you as a CLD practitioner? And what we found, and I will provide the slides that I've got for this, and you can have a wee look at some of the references there, that we did find that CLD staff, so you might be employed as a youth worker, but all of a sudden you were working in community development, you were working in ESOL, you were working in family, adult learning. So you were properly practicing CLD right across. So the kind of silos across CLD practice no longer existed. Everybody was moving into being a CLD worker. Blended approach was swiftly developed, and we really did move to trying to get digital, but also that kind of physical response to food and medicine, befriending, loads of different examples right across Scotland of where people were doing that blended approach. We worked 7 days a week. We worked every night. Do you know, the idea of CLD practice does not end at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and nothing that was really evident right across the pandemic. Again, some features of the workforce that have always been there but are really became marked. And I think for people that were working in hubs that were associated with schools, that really highlighted that we work really flexibly, and we work wherever the need is, you'll find a CLD worker there. What was key to everything was your knowledge and relationships and connections within the local community, so that it wasn't necessarily what was coming up from a kind of strategic level, it was what was happening on the ground. And people, other organisations and partners, and being able to say, well, actually the CLD staff, they know that, the CLD team know that, and that real support for the volunteers that were coming forward, that real advice on governance for the pop-up groups that needed, how do we open a bank account, or how do we just quickly get this off the ground. And what we did find that actually our raison d'etre of working with the most marginalised communities in Scotland, again, was highlighted about people working with addictions, homeless, asylum seekers, really kind of came to the fore. So it was fantastic, great that we know this, but unfortunately some of those issues still pervade in terms of leadership, succession planning, and digital. So in a kind of post-COVID world, there's different things that I think might help us as a sector. And that's maybe around about the national CLD policy and strategy. So Alan talked earlier about the government's proposal for a lifelong learning strategy, the youth work strategy, the adult learning strategy. And that might all sound very well, but at the heart of it, the golden thread that pulls it together is the aspect of CLD workforce, because none of these strategies are possible to implement without you guys on the ground. And actually, what does that mean? What do we need? How do we support? Is the infrastructure there for that workforce? There's something about highlighting the CLD role and value, because as we've heard this morning, lots and lots of different examples actually about education and learning. So whilst we might have been really helping out with community responses to food, there was clear support for learning and different responses to what that looked like, particularly if you remember back to the first lockdown, where you had lots of young people that still had to submit portfolios for Nat 5s, for hires, whatever that looked like. It was our CLD staff that was also helping the young people to submit some of that information that was needed. Health and wellbeing being a big focus of what we can support, what we can do, information advice at various levels, and that real community and community support group. So they're the kind of the key features that we've got to work on. CLD strategic leadership and coordination, nothing would have happened without somebody saying, right, we've got 5 million volunteers here. What does that look like? Where are we assigning people? Do folk know? Are they working safely? What happens? That coordination of what was happening across communities, and our role in that very much there. We will continue to work in and with poverty, digital, technology, and equity and inclusion being some of the key things. Now, what has been really raised to us in terms of CLD Standards Council is the issue of identity. And one participant in our questionnaire said, CLD workers need to be recognised as professionals in their own right, not just staff who can fill in any old job when there are staff shortages. I still don't think that we're recognised as professionals. And some of that flavour of that sentiment certainly came through with what we were talking about in this morning's groups. So what we were kind of thinking in the Standards Council, so we had this questionnaire of what COVID was looking like. We had an idea of what the kind of workforce issues, and then we were like, actually, we need to kind of have a look at the CLD pathways. How do you know if you're entering the profession, what the learning opportunities are? What does that look like? What do you need? Do you know, so our mission as the Standards Council, as a professional body for CLD, is to drive high standards of professional practice through professional learning, registration, and approval of programmes. And there's no need for me to go into all of that just now, because hopefully you'll know some of it, and it is available on the website. Do you know, and there is a long-standing recognition of the need for a pathway for professional learning opportunities with its roots in local communities, where CLD practitioners can start out as volunteers and continue as part-time workers, and going through the various accredited milestones along the way to become fully qualified practitioners with approved degree qualifications. The Scottish Government guidance and strategies are quite clear about the importance of qualified staff and highlight the importance of the pathway. And I guess the COVID-19 pandemic has seen an exponential growth in the number of people engaged in CLD type activities, and we want to build on that. I've put the link to what the professional learning review looked like. So when we were looking at the high standards of professional practice, what are the positive drivers that are already in place? So we do have a well-developed system for approval for registration and professional learning, and the membership of the Standards Council continues to grow year on year, which I'm delighted to see. We do have increased numbers, so that's another positive driver. And we do have an increased number of volunteers and employers voluntarily requiring Standards Council membership. I think nearly every local authority in Scotland, who are still remain the biggest employers today of CLD practitioners, require CLD posts for people to be members of the Standards Council. However, what's kind of the negative drivers of what could be detracting from that is that there's no mandatory requirement to join the Standards Council, which I know is debatable because it could be seen as being a positive thing, because it's the whole idea about democracy and people choosing to be there. But employers don't need people to be members of the Standards Council. They don't need people to be qualified. Sometimes there's a lack of recognition and people think that there might be poor job prospects. And one of the challenges that we've got is to kind of make visible the career pathways. So you might be doing a degree in community learning and development. So what does your career look like? So just even looking around the room today, you know, you can be involved in the Standards Council, you could be an HMI inspector, you can work with volunteers on the ground. I mean, really the employment opportunities for CLD graduates is quite wide and quite varied. Qualifications aren't always being valued by employers, which in turn, unfortunately, reduces the limits, the demand, because if we don't need it, that means we don't need to go and do it. So therefore that impacts upon the supply of the actual programmes. And often the institutions, you know, that are delivering CLD type programmes fit the supply to the demand. So that's where the problem actually comes in. And one of the issues that we need to kind of try and raise is about employer and institutions' recognition and use of the CLD approvals programmes that are in place. So we had a real good look at the kind of accredited pathways to CLD registered membership. We actually looked at we worked with SCQF to have an idea of here's level 1 to 12 in the SCQF framework, and where are the CLD programmes across each of these levels, what's been approved. So there is a matrix. It's too big to fit into this, so you can have a wee look at it. What is slightly depressing is that initially we had, when I first came into post 6 years ago, there was we had 10 professionally approved programmes in Scotland. We now only have 4 universities that are providing ordinary and honoured degrees for professional qualifications. And that is problematic if you live north of Dundee, because we've got a high concentration of members of the Standards Council that are in the northwest of Scotland, and Dundee is probably the only university that you can physically or geographically access. The rest of them are in the central belt. So that's problematic, and that's certainly an action for us as the Standards Council to pick up on. Should we be working with UHI? Should we be working with Aberdeen again? What actually is that need? What does it look like? There are 25 developmental programmes across, so there's a good pathway into the degree programmes, but they all seem to be associated with a particular strand of CLD. So whether that's about adult learning, community development or youth work, and the availability of these programmes, these 25 developmental programmes, varies across the country. So one of the challenges that we've got is in the naming, because if you're a learner, as somebody who wants to go into CLD as a profession, you're like, right, okay, so I'm doing an HN and working with communities. How does that fit with a degree in community education? Do you know, because the name isn't obvious. And we've actually been working with the FE and HE sector quite extensively over the last 18 months to look at how can we build that identity of courses. Is it about prefixing things, saying CLD working with communities, or CLD introduction to youth work, CLD adult learning, how do we build that body of identity so that people can see a career pathway that fits for them? Barriers, and obviously for people going on to do further and higher education, is about finance, and we've been doing some work with the Scottish Funding Council and how we can kind of support our students. We also find that in terms of our CLD students, that they tend to be aged over 25, so you're not necessarily, and that's symptomatic, I guess, of us as a profession, where you're not always having that traditional school leaver who leaves school with 5 hires and comes straight into CLD. And in fact, in many cases, people would argue against that, being the kind of route map, favouring having had some life experience and volunteering experience before you go in to do your degree. Diversity remaining to be an issue right across, but what is a supporting mechanism is that if you are involved in the HN programmes, the direct entry into second year and that kind of blended distance learning that is offered at Dundee University seems to be something that employers are supportive of, and that it helps to kind of meet the needs of employers and students. We do have an individual recognition process in place for the CLD Standards Council, so if you've been in practice for years and that you feel that your experience would warrant you being a full member of the Standards Council, we can put that in place and have a look at that. And one of the things that I think has really moved for us over the last 18 months has been that national move and improvement, I suppose, in terms of partnership working. So working closer with Scottish Government, Education Scotland, CLD Managers Scotland, because I think it's really important that we've got a strong employer's voice and that wider engagement with various, and not just COSLA, but also SCVO, and recognition that the voluntary sector is a huge employer of CLD practitioners. So some of the things, the CLD leadership challenges that we need to think about are what CLD role requires what CLD qualification, and that's really down to you as practitioners, as managers, as leaders, as volunteer coordinators. So what kind of information, what do people need, what competence do you need people to demonstrate, what standard, what level of membership of the Standards Council? When you're recruiting for jobs, thinking about the job titles, and again, just that trying to reinforce the CLD identity. I'm conscious when I first came into work, I was employed as a community education worker, and when I finished up practice, my job was actually area coordinator. Area coordinator of what? I actually managed 2 youth centres 6 days a week, part of the education department. So how can we prefix our job titles with CLD? Because I understand at times people have had to try and hide CLD so that they weren't being cut any more than was already in place, because sometimes employers thought that we were an easy target. But often what we're hearing is now that people are wanting to reclaim that space, reclaim that professional identity. And I'm always really heartened, particularly when you're on social media, or people send us emails and they've got at the bottom of their email address, member CLD Standards Council, or CLD somewhere in their Twitter account. So I would ask employers, and at whatever level, at whatever level, that's when you're taking on sessional staff, when you're taking on volunteers, when you're taking on students, please try and put CLD, just prefix it, because understanding that every area has got their own particular community need, and we don't want to be too prescriptive. And I guess there's something in here about the code of ethics, and trying to remember that our primary client is always the young people in the community and the adults that we're working with, and where are the issues, what are the boundaries, what are the challenges within that. And in terms of succession planning, some of the things that we can do, where are we taking student placements? One of the things that you'll find when you're moving into kind of leadership roles, actually having a student is probably one of the best experiences you can have, because not only does it ask you to challenge your own practice, but it reminds you of questions or makes you think about some of the theoretical underpinnings, and back to that, what kind of world do we want to live in, and where are we actually helping to affect that change? And there's also what else is needed, what data do we need? In terms of how many, Alan talked about at a national level, how much money is going into CLD, where are we actually pulling some of that together in terms of how many staff are deployed across regional improvement collaboratives, professional learning networks, what does that actually look like in terms of what's the data, what's happening in the college sector too. So what can you do? What can we do? Really, there is something here about that growing the learning culture. CLD Standards Council launched this document about 5-6 years ago, and generally time for a bit of a review around it and to move it on. But there's something about starting with yourself. Where are you? What nurture do you need? Over the last 18 months, the CLD Standards Council has put different things in place to try and support the workforce, our members. So the weekly newsletter has been really well received. People coming back saying, actually, I feel really connected. Some of the Twitter groups that people are involved in, the members' blathers, where people have led conversations. Last week we had a members' blather on the use of case studies. How do we tell stories? How do we demonstrate our practice? Where are we reflecting as a group of practitioners? And people are telling us that that's been a really safe space. So in the absence of being able to get together, having these digital monthly blathers and members catch-ups have been really important. That shared space of working with Education Scotland really to deliver some of that webinars and what's going on, and also what's happening in YouthLink or SCDC and some of those kind of national groupings has been really important for people to say, actually, I just want to dip in and go where you're at. In terms of health and well-being, one of the things that we did do, and some of you may have joined in, we have managed to get 4 sessions with Dr. Karen Edge from University College London, who over the last 2 sessions has been looking at some sort of COVID triage in terms of your own health and well-being. What does that look like? How's COVID impacted upon you personally? Recognising that in this pandemic, we might all be experiencing it, but it's not in the same way. And the issues of equity, anxiety, digital are affecting us as people as much as it is the learners in the communities that we work in. And it's thinking about, so what do you need now? What do you want to practice? And how can membership with the Standards Council help? We have introduced that kind of peer support in terms of communities of interest, professional inquiry, and we have introduced a coaching and mentoring opportunity. And that again was members just saying, do you know what, we've managed to, we've connected with each other. It's a great space from somebody from a different local authority or a different area of practice to kind of have that opportunity to talk about your career development, or when there's a particular challenge that you think might not be the best to have that conversation with my line manager, I want to talk it through with somebody else before I go to that. So please make those opportunities, because they're certainly out there. In terms of employers, there is that kind of having a wee look at approvals, SCQF rating and articulation. And again, using iDevelop, please continue to use iDevelop. So overall, what kind of world do we want to live in? As I said, a CLD type world, one where it is based on a wellbeing economy, it is about social capital, and it is about post-COVID recovery. And at the heart of that lies that strengthened CLD workforce and wider recognition of the CLD profession. And that is me. So happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Marion. I'll just be brief in terms of the questions part, because I'm conscious we need to go into the last sessions. Anybody got anything coming up? I see a couple of things just in the chat, maybe people expressing a bit of concern, or not concern, just asking, you know, a lot of the things about the CLD priorities, having to, you know, re-look for information when there's a lot of inspection material out there, and just maybe querying if that's kind of getting fed back in enough to highlight the impact that CLD has. But, you know, except what you're saying about in a changing world, we're also having a lot of challenges about a changing workforce and the need to be able to support that route.
To be honest, I think we've made the case. I think actually that is where we need more data, and where we as the Standards Council is actually about the labour market, Marie. It is about that qualifications. It is about not substituting full-time professional staff with volunteers. It is about people identifying as CLD. Where are the gaps? Where are people saying, oh no, well, I'm a youth worker, I'm an attainment advisor, I'm this, but actually it's CLD. that's where I mean, in terms of having some better, more robust data, because right now I could tell you the number of members that we have of the Standards Council, but actually that's not a true reflection of the number of CLD practitioners that there are across Scotland. Do you know, in the same way that perhaps the teaching profession can do that, do you know, and that's perhaps down to the mandatory nature of their registration. Not suggesting that we do that, but I'm just saying, so our information is more labour market information that we need rather than proving the point for CLD, because I think what Tracy Ramsey says is 100% right. We have made the case time and time again to our blue in face.
Yeah, so I get exactly what you're saying, and it's about how we actually get that.